All right, welcome everybody to Survive to Thrive. Super glad to be here with you on this Thursday. I want to talk to you about becoming the local economist of choice today. And I want you to just pay attention to the things that you should be paying attention to in order to be able to speak to your customers as the local economist of choice. All right, you have a real estate market that you work. It is your job to know that market better than anyone else. So write that down. It is my job to know the local real estate market better than anybody else. Now, then the next thing I want you to, bless you, whoever just sneezed. The next thing I want you to ask yourself is, what does that mean? What does it mean to know the local market better than anybody else? All right, here's the things you're going to track. Active listings on the market, not based on price, just total active listings within my local market. Here for me in North Pinellas County, I would track Plum Harbor, Dunedin, Tarpon Springs. If I want to just track everything that's west of US 19, not going to mean anything to all of you that aren't from here, everything that borders the Gulf of Mexico, I'm going to pay attention to single family homes between Dunedin, Plum Harbor, Tarpon Springs. How many homes are currently for sale? The next thing I'm going to pay attention to is what's the average days on market for those active listings. I'm going to go back and I'm going to study what was the active days on market for the same period last year. What was the active days on market for the market 6 months ago? In other words, what's the trend? Numbers tell a story. The path is in the math. Business is a math equation. So I'm looking for trends so that I can forecast the future based on what I'm seeing. The other thing I'm going to do is same thing for pendings. How many pending contracts do we currently have? What's the average days on market for those properties that went under contract? Here's an interesting stat that I want you to pay attention to. What's the difference between the average days on market for the pending sales and for the active sales? And if the pending sales are on the market for considerably less time than the active sales, why is that? Look for an answer to that question. I promise you it's in there somewhere. And when you find that, you become more valuable. Now, look at how many properties sold in the last 6 months. Same location. Remember, we're not looking at price. We're just looking at single family homes. How many sold in the last 6 months? I want you to divide that by 6, and that tells you how many are selling every 30 days. Again, look for a pattern. What does that number look like compared to 6 months ago? What does it look like compared to a year ago? You know, one of the things that we're finding, if you were here where I am, one of the things that you would see is there are fewer pending sales and there are fewer closed sales. However, there's very little inventory. So here's the question. Are there fewer pending sales and are there fewer closed sales because there's no homes to sell? Is that possibly the reason? You got to dive deep and again, study the numbers. I promise the answer is in there. And when you find it, you become more valuable. Now, what you're going to do is you're going to start breaking that same area up, but you're going to do it in price points. In other words, you're going to look in $50,000 increments. You're going to look from what, depending on where you live and what the average price is in your market. The average price here is about $425,000. So I'm going to start at 400. I'm going to go 400 to 450. Now I can tell you without actually doing it, the number of active listings is going to be very, very small, if any. There might not be any. All right. I'm going to look at pending sales between 4 and 450. I'm paying attention to average days on market. I'm looking for trends. How does that number compare to 6 months ago? How does it compare to a year ago? Look at the prices of the properties that went under contract. So if you're looking from 4 to 450, pay attention to the number of pending contracts between 440 and 450 versus 400 and 410. Is there a pattern there? If you discover that pattern, you become more valuable. It's part of being a strategic pricing professional. If you can show your customers, this is what the market looks like between 4 and 450, and this is how many sales that we have pending. And I dove a little bit deeper, and here's what I found out. I found out that the properties that are going under contract the quickest are the properties that are below 425. Matter of fact, the properties that are below 425 are going under contract in an average of less than 14 days, where the properties that are going under contract between 425 and 450, they're taking 45 days. So there's a big difference here. Look for those patterns. You become more valuable. Look at properties that sold. Same thing, same price range. Pay attention to average days on market. Pay attention to list price versus sell price. How does that number compare to a year ago? How does it compare to 6 months ago? Pay attention to list price to sell price for homes that had a price reduction versus homes that didn't have a price reduction. I promise you again, you're going to find a pattern. And when you do, you become more valuable. Now you're going to do the same thing for properties 450 to 5, 5 to 550, 550 to 6, all the way up to $1 million. Now, when you get to $1 million, you're going to break that search up by 100,000. In other words, 1 million to 1.1 million, 1.1 million to 1.2 million. You get to 2 million, you're going to look every $250,000, and so on. Now, do a different search for condos, do a different search for townhomes, and you could be in a market where single-family homes for properties that are between 7 and 750, less than 30 days of inventory. In that same area, drive 5 miles, less than 5 miles to the coast. Whether you're on the East Coast or West Coast of Florida, for example, you got condos that are facing the ocean, and those condos that are priced in the same price categories. You're probably looking at 4 to 5 months of inventory, maybe 5 to 6 months of inventory, maybe even more. When you're looking at the luxury market, you're going to see that the average days on market is much larger than the average days on market for properties between $700,000 and $750,000. Why? Because the shift shows up in the luxury market first. You're going to start seeing that market change before everything else changes, but it's a sign of things to come. All right, now having pricing conversations with your clients, it's really important that you're able to explain to them what defines market value. Well, first of all, market value is defined by what a buyer is willing to pay and by what a seller is willing to accept. That's it. That's what defines market value. But here's the other thing. You've got to be able to have conversations with people that make logical sense, that are very simple. In other words, super basic. All right. Take 2 properties, for example, in the same neighborhood. They're on the same street. One property is 2,000 square feet. The other one is 3,000 square foot. Now, if you use that 2,000 square foot home as your comparable and you looked at the price per square foot, and let's say that the price per square foot is $200 a square foot. All right, so the home is worth $400,000. Fine. You go down the street, you look at the 3,000 square foot home. That's your subject property. It's 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, just like the comparable. It has a pool, so does the comparable. It's sitting on a 1/4 acre lot, so is the comparable. It was built in 2005, so was the comparable. It has the same upgrades. Matter of fact, other than it's 1,000 square foot larger, it's exactly comparable to the home down the street. So you're like, okay, cool. I'll take $200 and I'll multiply it by 3,000. This property is worth 600,000. No, it's not. Huge mistake. Let me explain it this way. And this is exactly how I would explain it if I were sitting at a kitchen table and talking to my clients. I would draw on a legal pad, one box smaller, the other box bigger. The smaller box, I would write 1,000 square foot. And the bigger box, I would write 2,000 square foot. And I'm like, okay, Mr. Homeowner, Mrs. Homeowner, let's just say that we're going to look at these two properties identical, right next to one another. The only difference is one's 1,000 square foot larger, one's twice the size. Now, they both have kitchens. Yes, yes. They both have exactly the same size kitchens, built in the same year, using the same material. So let's say it costs $50,000 to upgrade those kitchens. Same kitchen in both properties, $50,000 kitchen. What's the cost of that kitchen? Well, let's figure out what the cost is per square foot. So let's divide that $50,000 kitchen into 1,000 square foot house. We're going to come up with a price. It's going to be different than if we divided that 50,000 square foot into that 2,000 square foot home. Now, if we take the same price that we got in that 1,000 square foot box and we put it in the 2,000 square foot box, then the value of that 2,000 square foot box is going to be much, much higher than the 1,000 square foot box, which would mean it would be overpriced. Now, is the larger home worth more? Yeah, it is. Is it worth $200,000 more than the home right down the street? No, it's not. So this is why you don't use properties that are not comparable in having a pricing strategy conversation. However, you want to bring every single property with you. In other words, when you're doing your homework and you're looking at these properties that are comparable, don't delete it and not bring it because it's not comparable. Bring everything. Now, when you're sitting at the kitchen table, you can tell them, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, we've got this home down the street from you that was 3,000 square foot. I've got it. Here it is. However, it's not comparable to your home. An appraiser wouldn't use it. So we're not going to use it in pricing your home. They'll understand that. It makes sense. Now, what if you have two properties that are 3,000 square foot and 2,800 square foot? Okay, you can use that 2,800 square foot, and this is where price per square foot does work. Both properties have the same location. They're right down the street from one another, both built in the same year, both same condition, both 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 2-car garage with a pool. However, one's 2,000 square foot larger. So you look at this one that sold, that's the 2,800 square foot home. You get a price per square foot. Your subject property, the one you're listing, is 3,000 square foot. You can take that price per square foot, multiply it by 3,000 square foot, and you're going to come really, really close to market value. Here's the rule that I follow, 10% rule. So I'm looking at properties that are within 10% of the subject property. If I'm sitting down at that kitchen table of the 3,000 square foot home, that means I'm looking at homes that are 2,700 square foot to 3,300 square foot. Everything else is not comparable. The other thing that I don't do is I don't look for all of the properties in the neighborhood that are sold, add them up, get an average price per square foot, multiply that by the square footage of the subject property. This is exactly what I do and exactly the words that I use. Gina, as the protector of your equity, I am looking for the best comparable. I only need one that sold recently that's as comparable to your home as possible, that sold for the highest price. And then I'm going to fight to get the most amount of money for your home based on that comparable. Now, one more thing, and then I'm going to stop. I'm going to give them 3 prices. After we've done all the research and we've had the conversation about pricing, I'm going to say, based on what I'm looking at, and I'm going to write it down on that legal pad. Based on what I'm looking at, I'm seeing 3 different options here. All right. One option is 725, and their heart stops because that's the low option. You're not telling them this, but it's the low option. And it's real. Based on the comparables, I can justify that home selling for 725. Remember, I'm going to fight for their equity. I can give their home away and sell it for 725 in 30 days, no worries. So one price I'm looking at is 725, and they're like, not happy. Now, the other price that I feel that we could price at here would be probably 750. And now they're smiling, right? Now, the third price is 740. Now here's what I think. I think that 725 is too low. They like you again. But I also feel like 750 is too high. I feel like the right price to meet your goals is 740. All right, guys, talk to me.
Example I used to use for square footage